Richard Petty is widely known as the king of NASCAR, and for good reason. Over an illustrious career spanning 35 years and an astonishing 1,184 races, Richard Petty clinched the championship in NASCAR's Premier Division, now the NASCAR Cup Series, a remarkable 7 times. This achievement ties him with fellow NASCAR legends Dale Earnhardt and Jimmy Johnson for the most NASCAR Cup Series titles. His dominance extends to race wins as well, with an unparalleled 200 NASCAR Cup Series victories. Petty's monumental contributions to the world of motorsports were even recognized with the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the end of his career in 1992. At the age of 87, Richard Petty is thankfully still with us today. However, his remarkable journey behind the wheel was punctuated by several brushes with death. In this video, we will delve into 3 specific instances where Richard Petty came face to face with the Grim Reaper and emerged against the odds to race another day. Richard Petty's first near-fatal accident occurred on May 9th, 1970 during the Rebel 400 at the Lady in Black, Darlington Raceway. On lap 169, Richard Petty brushed the wall in the 3rd and 4th turn. In his own words, that contact with the wall had messed up the front end. He continued on for several more laps, but 7 laps later, he lost control and his car smashed into the outside wall with tremendous force, knocking him unconscious. He later said in 2023 that he wasn't sure whether the steering completely failed that time or whether he simply had made another mistake. Either way, the second encounter with the outside wall sent his car careening across the track towards the pit wall, where it collided with brutal intensity. This second impact triggered a violent series of rolls before the mangled machine finally came to rest on its roof. The impact was so violent, in fact, that it managed to tear a 6-foot wide hole into the concrete pit wall. Unfortunately, in that era, window nets were not a standard safety feature. As a result, during the chaotic rolls, Petty's head went out of the car and struck the ground multiple times. Adding to the drama, Petty often raced with a rag in his mouth during this time. During the violent incident, this red rag became dislodged, creating the alarming illusion, particularly on television, of profuse bleeding from his head. This, combined with the apparent severity of the crash, led announcers and many onlookers, including part of his family, to fear the worst. Thankfully, their fears were mostly unfounded. Though, while Richard Petty miraculously escaped with his life, he wasn't entirely unscathed. Not only his head, but also his arm and shoulder had come out of the car during the wreck, causing his shoulder to become dislocated. As a result, he did have to miss the next 5 races, which was the only time he ever missed races because of an injury. One fun fact about this crash is that Petty hit the inside pit wall exactly where a plaque commemorating his 55th race win a few years prior was located. This accident, beyond its near-fatal consequences for the King, holds further significance for 2 key reasons. First of all, while the fatal accident of the late NASCAR champion Joe Weatherly at Riverside Raceway 6 years earlier had already alerted people to the danger of a driver's head coming out of the car during an accident, it was as a direct result of this terrifying accident that NASCAR mandated the use of window nets for all competitors in all their professional divisions moving forward. Secondly, while the first full flag-to-flag live broadcast of a NASCAR race would not come about for another year, and the first flag-to-flag broadcast of a quote-unquote long NASCAR race would not happen for nearly another decade, ABC's Wide World of Sports had decided to broadcast this portion of the Rebel 400 live, and had just switched their feed over prior to this accident. Therefore, as far as my knowledge goes, this incident marked a somber milestone as being the first major NASCAR crash to be broadcast live on network television, or at least its aftermath. Next, our journey takes us to the Tricky Triangle, Pocono International Raceway. There, on July 27, 1980, during the CoCa Cola 500, Richard Petty would perhaps come closer to death than ever before. On lap 56, a blown right front tire sent his car careening into the outside wall of the infamous tunnel turn. As Petty's damaged car slid back down the track, Darrell Waltrip, who had no time to react, collided with the driver's side of Petty's vehicle, resulting in a brutal T-bone impact precisely where the king was seated. This impact was not without its consequences. However, the precise nature of his injuries would be hidden from the public. The fact that he turned up in an Anniston, Alabama parking lot wearing a neck brace a week later and that he had a substitute driver finish the Talladega 500 for him would have warranted some explanation to the public though. And officially, that explanation was that his neck had been strained during the accident. But the truth was much more dangerous than this. In reality, his neck was broken, not strained. Funnily enough, he had sort of whimsically said to his crew chief after the accident, "Well, I think I broke my neck." Apparently, as he said later in an episode of In Depth with Graham Benzinger, he had said that because in his mind, well, his neck was hurting, so it was probably broke. Well, turns out he was actually right about that. In fact, at that same examination, the x-rays revealed that his neck had already been broken once before, without him even knowing about it. Remarkably, and perhaps recklessly, he kept the magnitude of his injuries hidden from NASCAR officials in order to avoid being sidelined, fully aware of the potentially fatal consequences that another such accident could have. In fact, he later said in an interview with Athletes Quarterly, quote, "That would probably be the biggest danger I ever put myself in. You know, you had broken legs, broken feet, or broken shoulders. You were okay to drive with that. But a broken neck is like having a concussion. One more time will get you." Such a scenario is highly unlikely in today's NASCAR, where not only is the test to obtain medical clearance before a race a lot more stricter, but also where missing a race or even a couple of races is no longer a big deal anymore for a driver. While Richard Petty obviously continued to race after his accident, it has been said by some that he never was truly the same again, and that this was the beginning of the end for the king. His final near-fatal accident occurred during the Grand American Race, the Daytona 500, on February 14, 1988. Restrictor plates in NASCAR actually had a long history dating back to the end of the 1960s, when speeds on the big tracks first began to exceed 200 miles per hour. However, they had disappeared again shortly thereafter in 1975 when NASCAR switched to other options to bring speeds down. Following Bobby Allison's frightening crash at Talladega the previous year, however, restrictor plates were reintroduced for the 1988 Daytona 500 in order to bring speeds down and prevent cars from becoming airborne. However, as the video clip clearly demonstrates, the plan didn't entirely succeed. Contact from the cars of Phil Barkdahl and AJ Foyt violently pitched Petty's car sideways, sending it airborne. The car then embarked on a terrifying series of approximately 8 rolls, scattering debris across the front straightaway and damaging the catch fence as it tumbled along it. Thankfully, as you witnessed, the car spent a significant portion of the crash pirouetting on its nose without striking the pavement. This crucial detail lessened the severity of the accident, as the forceful contact with the ground is typically what causes the most significant injuries in rollover accidents. Even after Petty's car had come to a rest, danger still lurked. Brett Bodine, having lost control due to a cut tire, had no way to avoid Petty's stationary car and slammed into it with considerable force. Despite the incredibly violent nature of this wreck, Richard Petty miraculously emerged with only minor injuries. Sources differ on exactly what kind of injuries he suffered in this accident. One source claims that he suffered a sprained ankle as a result of the impact from Brett Bodine's car, but mentions no other injuries. Another source claims that he suffered from a broken rib, ankle, and wrist. Apart from those injuries, he also suffered from temporary vision loss after the accident. Most likely this was due to the extreme G-forces that he was exposed to during it. So there you have it, folks. 3 chilling occasions where Richard Petty faced death head-on, and against all odds, survived to race another day. I hope that you found this look back at those dramatic moments interesting. If you did enjoy this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel for more content like this in the future. Maybe. You can also, if you want to, check out some of the other videos I did in the past, at least those that are still up on the channel. However, those videos are not nearly as good as this one, and I would really prefer if you did not, honestly, but do as you like. As always, the sources that I used can be found in the description below. They are mostly in chronological order, but not quite, because I had to add some sources later on, and at some point I didn't feel like renumbering all of the subsequent sources anymore. Anyway, that will be it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and until next time, maybe.